Did you know that the legend of Dracula was inspired by a real man, not a vampire, but a warlord whose thirst for blood made monsters tremble? His name was Vlad III, son of the dragon, but history would remember him by another name, Vlad the Impaler. This is the story of the man who reigned through terror, impaled empires, and became death itself. Welcome to my channel. And today, let's find out how this terrifying tale unfolded. In 1431, deep in the heart of Transylvania, Vlad was born into chaos. His father, Vlad II Dracula, belonged to the Order of the Dragon, Christian knights sworn to defend Europe from the Ottomans, but the world Vlad entered was fractured. Nobles, empires encroached, and trust was at dagger's edge. When Vlad was just 11 years old, his dad was betrayed by the very people he trusted. During a meeting about an alliance against the Turks, Vlad II was encircled, stabbed and beheaded, all in the name of unity. Little Vlad and his older brother were taken hostage by the Ottoman Empire as political pawns to be traded for Vlad II's release. However, the deal fell apart. The Dracula brothers spent several years trapped within the very empire they hated, studying their enemy while pretending to serve them. Vlad's brother eventually converted to Islam, took an Ottoman name and lived a life of luxury, but Vlad refused. Instead, he fought in battles against Hungary, even rescuing a local lord named John Hunyadi. Once free, Hunyadi vowed to help Vlad and his brother return to Transylvania. By 1448, when Vlad was 17, the plan was set. Vlad and his brother would marry two of Hunyadi's daughters, cementing an alliance between Hungary and Transylvania. But upon arrival, Vlad faced opposition. The Transylvanian throne had been taken by an ambitious noble, Nikolai de Gil, so the brothers were thrown into prison, forced to live as commoners. For 3 long years, Vlad waited, trained, watched, and listened. He learned the art of survival, studied the language, customs and culture of the country around him, and befriended influential figures within the castle walls. Then in 1456, when Nikolai went to battle, Vlad struck. Seizing the throne at only 19, he had finally become a ruler, but he wasn't exactly ruling a kingdom. Wallachia was just a small principality sandwiched between the mighty Ottoman and Hungarian realms. To survive, Vlad would have to do more than rule. He had to terrify. Vlad's first act was to invite the boyars, the Transylvanian nobility who had sold his father out, to a banquet. They arrived expecting celebration. Instead, they were marched up a mountain one by one and impaled before Vlad. Each noble was put on display for everyone else as a warning, loyalty, or death. And death, under Vlad, had a favorite method. When Vlad seized power, he was barely more than a boy himself. Yet his enemies underestimated him at their peril. Vlad knew he couldn't fight the Ottomans or the Hungarians head-on. Instead, he crushed those around him who threatened Wallachia or defied his rule, building up a reputation that kept larger powers at bay. His most common punishment for criminals and political enemies was wooden stakes, sharpened to a cruel point, used to skewer enemies and traitors alike. They would twitch, moan, and bleed, sometimes for hours. To some it was monstrous. To Vlad it was order. Fear was his currency, pain his law. In 1459, Sultan Mehmed II, the same man who had held Vlad hostage as a boy, looked to Vlad's tiny principality for tribute. When Vlad refused, the Sultan unleashed 100,000 men on him. But Vlad didn't flee or surrender. He fought. What followed was absolute terror. Entire villages were emptied, fields burned, crops poisoned. All food and water sources were contaminated, making the march across Wallachia a death sentence. Then came the field of 20,000 impaled corpses, left near the capital city of Targovist, a horrifying welcome gift for any approaching army. The Sultan turned back. Stories of Vlad's brutality spread, attracting attention from both sides of the conflict raging across Europe. Vlad had proved he could hold off the Ottomans, now he needed allies. In 1461, Vlad traveled north to Hungary to meet the powerful Queen Elizabeth. Hoping for support against the Ottomans, he presented himself well, showing he was cultured, educated, and pious. Elizabeth agreed to marry her daughter to Vlad, forming an alliance, but insisted Vlad convert to Christianity first. And so Vlad, the man who dipped his bread in blood, became Saint Vlad, baptized in the Roman Catholic Church. For a time, it seemed Vlad had won. With the backing of Hungary and the fearsome reputation he had built, Vlad grew bolder. He raided Ottoman-held territories, reclaimed parts of his homeland, and even marched into enemy territory, pillaging and burning until the Sultan retaliated. Mehmed II launched a full-scale invasion of Wallachia, seizing key positions around the country. Though outnumbered, Vlad was ready. Once again, his tactic was terror. Before retreating, he burned everything in sight, leaving behind a devastated landscape and heaps of corpses. The Sultan, enraged, ordered Vlad's wife and children killed in retaliation. When Vlad heard the news, he retreated deeper into the forests, rallying the peasants and common folk against the Ottomans. Most of Vlad's forces were wiped out and the rest scattered. Vlad's army was gone, his family dead, and his land in ruins. There was nowhere left for him to go, and so he surrendered, agreeing to end his resistance if his people were spared. But when Vlad stepped out of the forest to parley, he was captured and imprisoned. The Ottomans had tricked him. Vlad languished in chains for 5 years until 1469, when he was released and given a noble title, a coat of arms and a royal pension. Finally, Vlad could rebuild his life, or so he thought. Once free, Vlad went home to find Wallachia in ruins. His nobles, seeing an easy opportunity, had proclaimed him dead and divided his lands among themselves. Without hesitation, Vlad raised an army and marched on top. Within weeks, Vlad had taken back the city and executed his treacherous nobles. But after 5 years of fighting and imprisonment, Vlad was done. He declined offers to lead armies against the Ottomans and instead focused on rebuilding his principality, proving to be an unexpectedly good administrator. He built fortresses to protect his borders, punished corrupt officials, and made roads safe to travel. It is said a golden goblet stood in the middle of a public square, untouched for years, because none dared steal under Vlad's gaze. Still, betrayal returned. In 1474, Vlad was invited by the Hungarian king to join a campaign against the Ottoman. But when Vlad refused, the Hungarians turned on him, imprisoning him in a dungeon. 2 years later, Vlad escaped captivity and returned to Wallachia, only to be betrayed by his own nobles once more. They allied with the Hungarians and Bulgarians to seize his throne. Fearing for his life, Vlad fled to the forests with his family, rallying supporters along the way. Eventually, Vlad and his followers were found and attacked. Vlad's head was cut off and sent to the Ottomans as proof of victory. His body was never recovered. Yet Vlad did not disappear. Years later, tales of his cruelty spread like wildfire. German pamphlets called him a demon, a butcher, and in 1897 Bram Stoker gave the legend fangs and the name Dracula. But make no mistake, Vlad the Impaler was no fiction. He was a product of a brutal age, a man shaped by betrayal and consumed by vengeance. To some, a national hero. To others, a devil in human skin. Over 500 years later, his story still chills the spine. He ruled through horror and made sure the world remembered. Vlad the Impaler, the prince who stared into darkness and became it. If stories like these grip you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Because history isn't dead, it's buried alive.